Welcome to the Women's Hoop Show. This is a special episode dedicated to the WNBA's ongoing CBA negotiations and the rising tensions that could lead to potentially a historic lockout. Despite record-breaking viewership, merch sales, and a $2.2 billion media deal on the horizon, players say they're not seeing a fair share. Talks hit a standstill during All-Star Weekend, where over 40 players showed up to push for better pay and transparency. The message: pay us what you owe us. Joining me to break it all down is Tamika Tremaglio, Managing Director at Secretariat and former Executive Director of the National Basketball Players Association. There is so much to discuss. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tamika. Thank you for being here for this very important conversation that is happening in the WNBA world right now. I couldn't think of a better person to be here to break it all down. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so one reason why I think this conversation is so important is because a few episodes ago on the show, it was just me on my soapbox going off because I'm so passionate about these players and this league. But there is a baseline of context that I think we need in this conversation and insight on what's potentially going on behind closed doors of these CBA negotiations. And you're an attorney with your MBA. You took over as a head of NBPA in January 2022, led the negotiations for their 2023 CBA, which was a historic $50 billion CBA completed within 18 months. So I just want to start with the basics for our listeners. What is a CBA?
Yeah, so really, thank you for doing that, Jordan, because I say it so much and you say it with this quick acronym, and everyone's thinking, what are you saying? So it is the collective bargaining agreement. And essentially, the CBA covers everything with regards to the players specifically and how they conduct business. So it is everything from the amount of games they play, their hours that they're involved, their compensation, including all their benefits, travel expenses, everything that you need to know about the women and what they can do, what they can expect to receive is covered in the women's collective bargaining agreement.
And would you say this is, when we're negotiating this is the players versus the league, like the employees versus the employer, right?
Well, I think that is how people look at it for certain. The reality is, though, it should be more of a partnership, right? Where all tides rise, where the pie is getting bigger for everyone. But yes, historically, that is how it is seen, at least in the time of negotiation, because there are obviously things that the players want. There are obviously things that the league wants, and if you could pull them together, it would be more of this partnership, right? As opposed to
Mm-hmm.
versus, because ideally we want to be in a place where we can all benefit. But that's part of negotiation. So, yes,
Yes.
put simply, it is that way.
Got it. Got it. And with your knowledge, especially from your experience, this was a big decision for the WNBA players to opt out, especially because it was signed in 2020. This was supposed to run through 2027, and they are opting out now. With the rise and booming of the WNBA and the players kind of looking in saying, hey, we're kind of a part of this and why it's doing so well. Do you feel like it was the right decision for the players to opt out?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely believe it was the right decision. And even as we're seeing it play out now, we know that it was the right decision. We've seen so many things happen even over the last year that shows that it was the right decision because you're given more information and context. Typically, what happens in a negotiation, if you can imagine back in 2020, and I should mention, Jordan, that I was actually part of the negotiation for the women back in 2020. So I started working with the WNBPA probably in 2015, first on a pro bono basis. And then in 2018, we were hired to actually assist with the CBA. And so at that time, that was the very first time that they actually had revenue share. we learned a lot, even from 2018 to 2020, that changed the way in which we negotiated. So if you can imagine now, here we are in 2025, less than 4 months outside of the time of, the contract will end, potential lockout. And things have changed over the last 7 months, 8, 9 months, they have changed significantly. So we now have the benefit of a lot of things that we now know that change how the perception is for the women and how they look at how they should be compensated.
So much has changed. So much
Um,
has changed with the fandom, with the play on the court, and especially when we get into these negotiations. And so, from my understanding and from what we're learning about this, the players' primary demand is increase revenue sharing. You mentioned that. And to match the league's growth that's happening. So, in simple terms, what does that mean? Because we have seen numbers thrown around compared to the NBA's revenue sharing, the NFL's, MLB. What does revenue sharing mean?
Yes. So essentially, particularly as it relates to the women, the revenue share is we want to participate in the revenue that has been earned. We also want to receive a part of that. Under the current CBA for the women, they would expect to receive 50%. And that is, of course, after a number of thresholds are met, including that it's looking back at, losses that may have occurred in prior years, et cetera. And in this particular instance, they're entitled to 50%. But what that means is that 25% of that would go to the players, 25 of the 50 would go to the players. And then the other 25% is now incorporated into the marketing portion that can go to select players. So it is not quite 50%, and it's not so straight as we reach a threshold and they receive 50%. There are a lot of nuances within the CBA that actually break down that portion, even into a smaller part, which is, part of the concern for the players as well.
And so the players now, when they say that they want 50% of that revenue share, it's like 50%, like very clear cut. Is that what they're kind of aiming for?
Well, I don't know, and at least I have not heard of exactly the amount that they're saying that
Okay.
they want. What they have said is that we want equity, right? And what they mean by that is that we want to take advantage of the significant, as you already put it, Jordan, the tremendous growth of the W. Viewership up 140%. $2.2 billion media deal, a team being sold for $250 million. They want to make sure that they're receiving a piece of that as well. And as the CBA is currently written, they aren't getting the benefit of the tremendous growth that they receive. So as I understand it, that's what the real holdup is that they really want to make sure that they are also being compensated. It's not looking for a raise, right? We're not that, fundamental where they're saying we want to actually receive a little raise. They're saying that it's really about restructuring how women's contributions are actually viewed in the sport, not only athletically, but commercially and culturally, like how they're actually being viewed and how that's showing up in terms of their overall compensation.
I love how you put that because there is this conversation too about salaries and salary caps, and all of that is within the CBA, but that is separate from the revenue sharing, correct?
That's correct. It is separate,
Okay.
but it's separate, but the women want to receive total compensation holistically. The salary becomes a part of it, revenue share becomes a part of it. But, let's talk about transformational, right? I've heard a lot of discussion around transformational. The women want to see something that's transformational. To date, what they're seeing is very transactional. Let's
Mhm.
change the salary cap. Let's, increase players' compensation by the rate of inflation and all of the things that are happening. The reality is they want to see them think outside of the box, right? Why aren't they considering the fact that the growth of a franchise has grown exponentially? How can the women benefit from the fact that they have, put so much into it to make it grow to where it is, right? They want to see that they're actually receiving something directly from the media deal. Now, revenue share obviously is a way to do that, but not if you're going to continue to carve out so many pieces of it that you're kind of left with such a much smaller pie. Those are the things that they want to see change. not the transactional changes, it's the overall transformational change, seeing the contributions that the women make to the game. They are the biggest asset. And so when you think about it at the end of the day, they should be receiving a lot of the reward. And the way in which it's structured now, that's not what's happening.
Mm. And from what you were a part of for the NBA side, and I'm sure, even though, we look at the numbers and it is significantly more from what the WNBA players are currently getting, I'm sure the NBA players still felt that way too. Because I listened to one of your interviews and you said the NBA is the marketing arm, but the Players Association is about the players and about them as employees. So, from your experience and even through your works of the NBA side, how did those conversations go about rev share?
Yeah, so obviously, I think from that perspective, it was different because the men have been benefiting from the revenue share for a really long period of time. So that wasn't one of the main issues, right?
Mhm.
In that particular instance. And I think there was a recognition clearly of the value that they bring to the game. And essentially, the women are not asking for equity in the exact same way. They're not asking for it to be equal, right? I want to make sure the perception is very clear. What they're asking for is parity. If you are, making X as a league, we want to make sure that we're receiving the same amount the same amount. When I say same, they want to receive equal contributions, right? In
Right.
some formal way, whatever that percentage happens to be. And right now it's not showing up in that way. So it's
Mhm.
really the question is to be more creative, reimagine what you can do as a league with the players. I mean, why not consider if a team goes from X value to this value and you all have contributed, how about that percentage being possibly being incorporated into your overall compensation? It's
Mhm.
not, that's simple economics. We could figure that out. Men now they have PE that can buy into teams. The players union can now buy into the PE firms that are buying into teams. Why not think about that for the women? Right? Why not be more creative in terms of ways in which we can actually execute on this so that the women feel like they're being treated fairly, that they feel like they're part of the overall equation as opposed to again receiving a raise, which is much more transactional in nature.
All right, this conversation is incredible so far, but let's take a quick break, pay our bills, and we'll be back to talk about what happens if there's a potential lockout, and what happens in these moments in orchestrating these big time moments with t-shirts. We'll be back. Currently, what we know from this past meeting at WNBA All-Star is that over 40 players showed up to represent the Players Association in this in-person meeting, which was awesome.
Amazing.
But amazing. And you saw that there's a photo going around of all them squeezed into an elevator, and it was just perfect to see that type of representation. But the players expressed that they were disappointed by the meeting and they felt like it was a missed opportunity with all these players being there because there was no movement made. So it seems like we're at a standstill right now. There is still time before that deadline of the October 31st, 2025. But side note, the finals in October 19th. So that gives less than 2 weeks before that deadline. So the next question is, when we think about deadlines and topics, what happens if there is no deal reached by that time frame?
Well, what I will say, and it is disappointing, right? But I truly believe no one had the expectation that they would sit down during, All Star Weekend and it would be resolved and everyone would walk away. So that's the harsh reality: is negotiations is a process. And they have such tremendous leadership in Neka Agumake, who has now been through this, several times. So she is on top of it. This was a great time for the players to become informed, to understand the issues, et cetera. And I gathered from, the same thing that you have seen, that they at least understood. They had a chance to actually talk and to dialogue. And that's partly what you want in negotiations. I also appreciate, and I'm sure that they do as well, that a work stoppage is not going to be beneficial for anyone, right? They have such tremendous momentum right now that the last thing anyone would want to see happen is for them not to play, to have a stoppage as of October 31st. So I think there is time, believe it or not. We were negotiating during the middle of a season too. That old saying, like, you need something done, go to the person who's the busiest. And, clearly it's a busy time for them. But I am still holding out in the thought that they can get this to work.
How often are typically are they meeting? I mean, they said that this last in person was December, but are there virtual meetings? Are they quarterly, monthly? How often do these conversations happen?
It's a great question because it is different for everyone, right? And so I don't know the answer to how often they are meeting, but what I can tell you is that it will be quite a bit between now and October 31st. But I don't know the cadence or, any of that. But I'm certain that they are all going to rise to the occasion. Whatever they need to meet, I'm certain that they will. And I know Terry Jackson is certainly on top of things and making sure that's happening. And I know NECO will make the time along with the executive committee. That's really phenomenal. They are really, these are sophisticated business women, right? Looking out for the benefit of the whole, which I think is such an amazing thing. It's also a really different time because these women are entrepreneurs who have been having NIL deals, et cetera, prior to entering the league. That's not how it was back in 2020, right? So now you're dealing with women who have actually experienced what their brand is and the value associated with it. So much more sophisticated business leaders. And as a result, everyone has to rise to that occasion. It's a good thing for them. Bravo for our women.
Yes, yes. I love that you said that because these are not only are the advisors some badass women, but also the players are college graduates. They are entrepreneurs. They have a lot of things going on. And I want to stay there for a second because the commissioner in comments has come out and alluded to, there's a business side of this that the players just aren't understanding. And that is something that I have a hard time believing because they are business women too. But I would love to hear the other side of this conversation, kind of play devil's advocate a little bit. What is the league saying when they are asked to increase revenue share, increase salaries? What is the league's perspective in this and why maybe they would say no or why we could potentially be at a standstill?
Yeah, I think while I can't speak clearly on behalf of the league, what I can say from an outsider looking in is that I don't doubt that they want to increase compensation for the players. I don't doubt that they want better travel benefits and retirement and all of those things. I am certain that they want that too. As I understand it, just from the things that I've read, I think the big tension is around sustainability, right? That's what I hear them saying is like, this is great, but we need to see this play out over the next 10 years. Well, to some extent, I think that's a reasonable thing. But the reality is we have seen that their value is increasing. There's no better proof for sustainability than the fact that you have more people buying teams at a higher price, right? So, I get it and understand sustainability, and it is wise as a business leader to make sure you can continue this and you can't just pay people on what happens in one single day or one single transaction. But I think the way in which we're seeing the sport go, we know that it is heading in the right direction. And quite frankly, as I understand it, the women are also not saying, hey, pay me regardless of, how things turn out. They're agreeing to be part of it, right? They're saying it's about shared performance. So if you do well, we want to do well. If you don't do well, we understand why we wouldn't do well. That's what this is about. So we all will sustain and we will all make this go in the right direction. It is to the benefit of the women as well that they do well. I can't imagine any woman playing professional basketball doesn't want to see the league continue to grow. And what better way to make sure that everybody has their skin in the game than to be able to share in the overall results of that? And simply that's where I see it going. But the decisions that are being made certainly are a result of, making sure that it's going to be sustainable from what I have read.
I say all the time, the players want a job in in 10 years. They wanna make sure that there's a league to be played in. They wanna make sure that it's better than what it is right now and better than the past. Do you feel like, when we think of the history of the WNBA, there was a time where there was really rapid growth and there was a lot of expansion teams coming in, some 4 teams sometimes in one season, and
Mhm.
that kind of backfired. And then there were teams that had to go away, and there were repercussions of that. Do you feel like there's kind of a little bit of this gun shy of like, well, before when we tried to do really rapid growth, it didn't go so hot. So maybe we just want to be, cautiously optimistic from a league perspective?
Yes, no, absolutely. And all of that, again, is understandable. It's
Yeah.
also all of that can actually be properly, executed in a CBA. Again, make the CBA in such a way that when you're growing, we're growing. If we start to, have pressure and we start to lose teams and we're not growing at the same rate, then we don't expect to be compensated the same rate, right? That is not that uncommon. And in fact, I think that's what we were trying to do back in 2020, because as you can appreciate, it's been, 5 years only that they've been able to share in revenue. And it's only as of the last few years that that's even been a possibility, right? And
Wow.
so for certain, those things should be taken into account, but I think it's a matter of reassuring and thinking creatively on ways in which they can take advantage of that growth. There needs to be a way to align the compensation with performance and growth. And
Mhm.
it's that simple, really. But I understand the concerns around sustainability, et cetera. But that's why it's a partnership and you share in that. It takes us back, Jordan, to where we started, right? When you said versus the league versus the players. It should not be that way. It's to everyone's benefit for the pie to grow.
Mhm. Mhm. When you mentioned taking into account, I just wanted to ask your perspective on how other leagues outside of the WNBA and their success, when we think of leagues like Unrivaled, which is an off-season league, very successful. Salaries are averaging 220,000, and players have equity in the league, and marketing has blown up. How much of that league and their success is kind of playing a role in these negotiations with the WNBA, you think?
I don't. It is actually a great question, Jordan. I think that I don't know how much it's playing a role. It's obviously a really good example of something that's working well, right? I am so proud of them for doing what they're doing and obviously getting support from players and everything. It's a wonderful thing. I think it has brought to the forefront the reality of how successful it can be, but you also have to appreciate it's a smaller time frame, it's a smaller group of players. It does in no way compare exactly to, what you see with the WNBA. So it's a little bit of comparing apples and oranges, but it does put that out there that this is a significant amount of money, and look at how much they can make over this period of time. They are reaping the benefit of their performance being directly related to the compensation because they have equity. So it's a really good example of when you get it right. And that's all they're saying is, let's get it right. But
Mhm.
recognizing that it may not be the same, because there's a lot of things that the players do receive in terms of benefits, et cetera, that are very positive. But there's some room for growth.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you say that because I think a lot of fans on the outside are just like, it's a versus, Unrivaled versus the WNBA. But actually, and I believe Nafisa Collier is one of the founders, has said that they're complementary to each other.
They
If Unrivaled does well, if the WNBA does well, that just means more money for professional women's basketball players staying in the States. So we need each other kind of to be on the right page and the right page of history.
That is exactly right. You hit it right on the nose. It is really the two are complementary, no question.
Love that. All right, let's pause right there and take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about what goes into the playbook of orchestrating a huge thing like we saw at WNBA All Star. We'll be back. Okay, as we wrap up, this has been so incredible and so informative. The last thing I want to say is kind of this idea around, the players showing and wearing the shirts around WNBA All Star that specifically say, pay us what you owe us. And it was this united front that all the players wanted to show. And specifically, these moments aren't random. This is when the spotlight is hot on the league and everyone is going to be tuning in to WNBA All Star. What goes into that playbook of making a statement versus when to make the statement versus when to keep it in house and like, okay, let's huddle up first versus which players should make a statement? We talk a lot about Caitlin Clark being the face of the league. Her wearing that shirt was just as important as all of the players wearing that shirt because we knew that the news wires were going to show her picture in that shirt. So, what, in your opinion, kind of goes into these moments around when to make statements when we're negotiating CBA?
Yeah, so the reality is that this is no different for the women. They have always shown up, right? And they have been very clear about what's important to them and delivered a message, whether it was in the bubble, whether it's here. I was cheering because I just thought this is such a great time. But to your point, there's a lot that goes into this process, right? There's a lot that they had to orchestrate, including perhaps even having conversations with the league to, make sure that it was okay because you have media partners and, all of that. So, while it is clearly a phenomenal, statement on their part, and it made me so proud. It really, really did. And when you say too, I know I've heard the same about, Caitlin being the face of the league, et cetera. She certainly is a phenomenal player and certainly shows up, and I love that as well. But really, it's all of the women who are the face of the league. Every one of them has their own story. Every one of them has contributed in some way. She is a profound athlete. She's amazing, and I love what she is doing. I love the fact that she's been engaged in it. But we have a pretty powerful executive committee that has been showing up for the last year since they locked out, and even prior to that, that is really doing amazing things. And I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost on everyone, because without them, we wouldn't be there. And the people that support them at the NBPA office is just incredible. And they have a very lean team under Terry Jackson, and they are making it happen. So bravo for them.
Yes, so well said, because it takes a united front. I think it would be a different message if one player or three players only wore it. It took everybody saying that they were going to be on these shirts. And I also just real quickly love that you said that this has been a historic thing for the WNBA, because it goes back, 2016, the Minnesota Lynx wearing Be the Change and those type of shirts against police brutality. And then the bubble, the whole wubble in itself was this huge moment for the Players Association to say, yes, we're playing basketball, but we want to make sure that the focus is on what needs to be the focus. And
Yeah.
now even the 2022 All-Star game, when they all came out the second half wearing number 42 for Brittany Griner, who was detained in Russia at the time. So this is not something new for the WNBA players. They are really powerful when sharing their message. And so I love that you brought that up.
No, they really are. It's amazing. They're such a true example.
Well, Tamika, you have been so awesome in breaking this down. And I just want to make sure that everyone hears this. New WNBA fans, old WNBA fans, I know that I get a lot of DMs saying, I'm a new here. What is this CBA? When did this start? Has it always been there from the beginning? And I think this is a great starting point for all WNBA fans. So if you are listening to this episode, share it with someone so you don't have to explain all of these details. Make sure to get the word out so that everybody is kind of on the same page and understanding why WNBA players are fighting for revenue share for more money as they should. So make sure to share. Thank you, Tamika, for your insight. We really appreciate it here on the Women's Hoop Show.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It was absolutely a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an update. Your support means the world. And if you're feeling generous, leaving a quick rating or review helps more Hoops fans discover the show. And you can now see us on our brand new YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe there. Shoot us an email at women'shoops@odyssey.com to tell us what's on your mind. We want to hear your hottest takes, your burning questions, and all your feelings about all things women's hoops. We just might feature your note on the show. That's women'shoops@odyssey.com. The Women's Hoop Show is an Odyssey original podcast hosted by me, Jordan Robinson. Our producer is Phil Sweetek. Our video team is led by Kurt Courtney and includes Tim Meikle, Evan Cox, Allison Jeffrey, and Lauren Vieira. Our executive producers are Greg Holtzman, Asha Saluja, Danny Freisinger, Maddie Sprunkheiser, and Leah Reese-Dennis. And special thanks to Moira Curran and Josephina Francis.